So how to showcase a game that doesn't exist? Catchy title, makes no sense from a standpoint of like logic. If it doesn't exist, how can you show it? It was actually an idea that came about like kind of randomly as a marketing tool or like as a marketing event. But first up, my name is Isaac Sanchez. I'm the co-founder of Ludoteca, which is a creative game development collective. I'm also the founder of Not a Game Studio, and I'm currently working with Infinity Games, which is a brand of mobile free-to-play games. But, and I don't know if I can swear, but this is a story and this is the prologue. And so what the, because I don't know if I can say slurs here, but I actually edited this an hour ago because there was a lot of nasty words. This is one of them, but what does showcasing a game that doesn't exist mean? And to give you kind of a glimpse of Not a Game Studio, we were kind of at the moment trying to activate and affirm ourselves not only as a game studio, but as a game studio that is more performative and more creative. And one of the ideas was we need to be performative, not in the sense of performative like revenue or like user acquisition or something like that, but performative in the sense of performance, in the sense of artistic performance. So we kind of did a lot of experiments at the time, and the idea was really simple. We made a mock-up joke game 2 years ago. We submitted to a program here in Portugal that is called the PlayStation Talents. We kind of named it Uranus because we thought it was a self-evident title of that we were joking. So we made a lot of jokes like Uranus is amazing, stuff like that. And we pitched like a prototype that made no sense. We kind of made a lot of promises, like it could go back in time and time travel, like sort of stuff like that. And we were kind of pitching this concept that was actually not supposed to be an actual game. And then PlayStation Talents picked it up and gave us a venue. Actually, we had to be at 2 venues in the same month. And so, like, because I didn't understand the joke, actually 2 venues didn't understand the joke, we actually needed to make an actual game around a joke game. And actually there's gonna be a talk tomorrow about this game, but this is not about it. But just to say that we kind of fell in love with the joke game, and it kind of made sense eventually. And the idea came of this thing that I'm going to talk about. The idea came that we were at some venues, we were actually changing the game at the venue. So here's an image of Francisco. Actually, this is a game that a lot of kids like to play, playing with Uranus. And like, this is Francisco. And Francisco, this was, the epiphany happened at that moment. It was, I think, a Wednesday, nothing happened in the morning, and Francisco was just going there. We were there with Unity Editor open, and like he was saying, like, change this color, change the rate, change everything, the shapes of the avatars and everything. And like, something clicked. Why not actually go to a venue and just be with the audience and like go with them? And so there was sort of a plan that arrived from nowhere, which was, let's go to a venue with nothing, like no game. And we start the game from scratch. And this was actually something that was feasible because on the team, a lot of us had experience with game jams. If you don't know what a game jam is, like, it's going to random place with random people and making a game in a week, 48 hours, something like that, like making something under pressure. And like, why not do that at a venue? And why we did it is a different thing. So like, this was a 3-man job with a woman, so 4-man job. but actually like there needed to be an artist, a programmer, and someone to take feedback from the users. So someone that wasn't actively working. And this was actually too much for someone, so we divided that into two. And the reason why is that, again, game jam, music jam, like this sort of this performative act of making something in the moment that's really, it's not the result itself, but it's the process that we wanted to share with the public. But it was not only that, it was the marketing gimmick, in which that if the users, the public, gave us their emails or like their contacts, we could actually do a better job of creating a mailing list and giving them the game. So another idea was that as you were giving feedback, you would be credited in the game. So on the abstract, it was an interesting idea. Sorry. And so Lisbon Games Week was the venue that picked up this idea. We kind of pitched it around. And Jazzland Miami was actually a title that came up eventually, not during the event, but after. But it was actually in sync with the whole theme of the thing, like making jazz music live in the moment. So this is a prototype of a game that we made some time ago, actually not with the studio, but with another studio. But it was, I think I'm gonna kill the audio. But it was basically this game that was never finished. It was a game that was top-down in the dark. And it was really like, there was a shadow system that really worked. And since we were doing that, we thought, why not recycle something that we already have? So the game had to be with a lot of shadows. This 2D shadow system was to be recycled. And eventually, like, we thought, okay, at least we recycle some things. The Lisbon Games Week venue was at Phil, which is here in Portugal, in Lisbon. And so it needed to be top-down, so as we would recycle that. It needed to be noir, because one of the things that we were going to recycle was a lot of shadows. And this was actually a practical idea. So if we are, Lisbon Games Week is 4 days, if we are actually doing this out of the blue, like, we need to contain the number of assets that we're gonna show, right? Like, because we were developing the assets at the venue. So, like, masking that with shadows would be a perfect idea, in theory. Then it needed to be noir, it needed to be top-down, and, like, at some point we made a trailer. We had no idea what we were doing. So this time I'm not gonna kill the audio, because it's sort of important.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So we kind of came up with the name Vinyl for no reason. And I was searching for a music that would fit the teaser, and that music was perfect. Then I thought, like, if we pick that music, maybe we should incorporate that into the game as well. And so it needed to be a rhythm game. There's also another reason for that, but I'll go into depth about that other reason later. But it needed to be basically, needed to be a rhythm game with that music, top down, with a lot of shadows. That was a nightmare to do level design, and we did a couple of levels before the event. So, like, one of the biggest problems with showcasing a game here in Portugal is that if you are an indie developer, they usually push you to, like, somewhere no one can see, because, like, most venues don't really care about indie developers. And we were trying to hack the system, trying to do something like no game, like a lot of user engagement, public engagement. And with that in mind, we kind of thought of a system which is, there's games that are good to be showcased. And there's games that they aren't good. Like, for instance, if you were to showcase a great game, for instance, Civilization, in a venue, like you look at it as a visitor and you look like at all those menus and all that, those systems and everything, and you're like, I don't want to play that. But if you're just walking in the venue and suddenly you see like big screen, something flashy, like you go, and I want to play this. So we needed to be something that as soon as the player stopped playing, then the game would reset and go with a big flashy screen. So it would be a game about failure, a game that you would lose constantly. So a rhythm game made a lot of sense. So it should be a shooting rhythm game, right? This is me working on Microsoft Paint. I'm not a great visual artist, but like we kind of needed to make sense of the music. Another stupid idea that I had was that every note in the file of the music would represent a shot. So if this is a shooting game, if you hear pa pa, like that's 2 shots, right? Like shot, shot. And there's a lot of instruments as well in the jazz music. So every different instrument should be a different weapon. That was a stupid idea, but we did it anyway. And so that presented a lot of problems if it was top down. For instance, if it's noir, should have the aesthetic of noir, because if it doesn't, like, it's not justified. And the only way you can actually sell in top down that the setting is this is if you kind of have elements of like a detective, like safes, like those old, I don't know, cigarettes, cigars, and everything. And that said, like the only logical way to start the game would be at an office. Also, like top-down has this problem of visibility, that if you have something really big, like the avatar is too little and you don't understand it's the avatar. So it kind of, like this was the maximum size for the game to make sense. So it needed to be a really, really small place. And even though I edited the music, like the only way the music would make sense in this game was if the overture, which is really punchy and has a lot of notes, would be the beginning. So we kind of had a problem, which was we needed to start with a level that was really small and would have a lot of notes, which means a lot of bullets. That was a problem, because imagine, and you're looking at this and it makes no sense to you, that's also a problem, but because for the first days, users would only see that. Like imagine here on the top is a door that failed as enemies went through. Like you would be trapped there. The only way you would exit was like going around the enemies or something like that. That was a problem, but we kind of solved it with this. A lot of things break. You kind of go around the sofa, something like that, like a lot of tricks like that, and I'll show you that in the final video. But yeah, like this is what we had. So this was a risky project, right? Like as you can see, like these mock-ups have no readability. There's also the thing of Lisbon Games Week as a venue is very loud and very hot, and 4 days in those circumstances are very hard to work with. There's also the thing of we kind of got what we wanted, and Lisbon Games Week was so interested in our project that they started investing in it. So they gave us material like a record player and stuff like that, and they also pushed us into the front of the venue. They put us next to PlayStation, and so a lot of pressure was there. But also the fact that we had no idea if this was going to work. Like a lot of stuff could go wrong. And if they did go wrong, we, like our careers might suffer. Like we would be banned probably from the event from then on. So this is sort of like a huge mass of people. Also, like it's not infrequent that people steal material. Like we bought a TV, they could break the TV. So this is the sort of stuff that they bought. And so, did we pull this off? Yeah, we did. So, I had this video here, and if it's probably, yeah, it's actually working. It's in Portuguese, unfortunately.
Houve projeto muito curioso este ano, que era desenvolver jogo ao vivo desde que as portas abrissem. No início eram apenas umas linhas. Se vocês conseguirem ver os
Quantos developers é que estão?
Estão 3 pessoas. É abismal.
Entraremos em direto.
So we had TV and everything, public TV. It's going to be very loud, probably.
Está artista a trabalhar em
So we had like proper coverage for once.
E tem aqui uma pessoa cá fora a guardar os contactos também para manter, para dizer vocês são parte do jogo, porque nós desenvolvemos isto convosco. Portanto, é projeto muito, muito delicioso.
Another requirement was that we had a live stream during the event. That was a problem, but here's a time lapse of us working. So we kind of did a lot of, all the visuals were done at the event, most of the code was done at the event. This is sort of the evolution we had. First, like, flashing screens, like then proper textures, and even though, like, we were when I just pause here, like, sorry, I'm not used to using, but if I pause it here, I think it was here. Yeah, as you can see, that's what, like, the mockup that you were seeing is this. And this is it needs a lot of abstraction for the user to understand what you're doing when you don't have anything, when the game actually doesn't exist. And so, like, those dots, even though this is properly presented, there's a lot of elements that are incomplete at this point. You kind of have the players, the avatar, which is red, and the enemies, which are blue. They were not done at that time. But you can, when I was telling you about, like, enemies entering and there's a lot of notes, that's sort of the problem. How do you exit this room if they enter through here? It was a lot of problems, and the actual game takes place in a building that was all mapped with the music. That was a lot of work prior to the event. And I'm glad we did it, because, like, if we didn't have that, it would be a complete failure. But I'm skipping this video because it's a bit redundant, and I'm just gonna go straight to our story. So part 3, day 0. We did all of me and Microsoft Paint. I'm very good at Microsoft Paint, as you can see. We did a lot of assets like this. This was done in 2 minutes. And in the beginning, as I was saying, like, people are playing this and they're looking at this aberration of an image. This was another one. I'm Picasso here. And there was a lot of cutscene elements. For instance, this was the death screen. And this was the score screen as well. So I made the things in a way that the artist would take the assets and would just change them. And in that way, like, it would be very easy to actually implement the elements back into the game. So the game was mostly working on day 1. So this was, again, the thing that I was telling you about. You pass by and you see a big screen. Again, this screen is not very impressive because it was made in Microsoft Paint. This is the artist working on the asset that will be there eventually. When I said the record player and everything, we kind of add a lot of stuff that it's not showing in this slide. But, like, this was essentially what the users were looking at in the first day. Like, couple of hours later, I was able to implement this. And there was a lot of problems concerning those 2 roles of talking with the audience. So a lot of the time of engaging with the audience was, yeah, now here's a sofa, and these dots are enemies, and that's sort of how we ended up doing it in the beginning, the first day. It was really bad. Nobody wanted to actually play the game the first day. And I thought that we needed to change the assets, but there was a priority list of what assets were more important. In my opinion, the top of the priority was the title screen, and it ended up being a really good prediction, because as soon as we changed like the first assets, for instance, this became this, and like it's quite a difference. As soon as this happens, like people want to play. Like the actual gameplay elements, like people would stay because they would engage. Instead of bullets, we had flashing lights. But like as soon as we had the floor as well, suddenly it wasn't as abstract. And here's like people like a bit confused. As you can see, this guy's face is like, what am I playing? But that's a good thing, because they were actually engaging. And this is the title screen. So what I showed you in the beginning became this. And as soon as we did this, a player left, the avatar would die. Then it would reset to this, and we had this huge TV with a flashy title screen. And that was enough for people to engage with the product. That was non-existent. So at day 2, so 2 days passed, and I have to make a couple of remarks, which was that what we thought would happen, happened, which was we were really tired just being there. If you're sitting at your home coding or making art or whatever, it's not nearly remotely the same thing as being in a storm of people, like constantly walking by, like a lot of heat waves, and also the army. We had the army at the venue. So I don't know if who was at Lisbon Games Week last year? Yeah. So you remember the army, right? Like there was in one place, the army decided to go there and to kind of recruit young people. So I don't know what their logic was, but it was like, yeah, Call of Duty stuff, military stuff, like people like to shoot and stuff. So like gamers, they want to be in the military, man. And so they brought tanks and weapons and everything, and that's fine. But one of the exercises, or one activity they had, was a rappel wall that every time you climbed, it would sound off an alarm bell that could be heard outside the venue. And that would happen every 10, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. So we were, like I was with headphones in maximum and I couldn't hear any music when the alarm bells weren't on. With the alarm bells, my brain would be pierced with this ambulance sound. And so this is how we were working. And another thing was that I'm a programmer. I see things abstractly. So when when we did the schedule for the production, I thought like the art wouldn't be as taxing, because I think I see things very low poly. Like if I imagine something like this, like wouldn't be as detailed. And in the first day, the artist comes to me and shows me the first, like the end of the first day shows me the first assets, and they're really, really good, but they're too good. So we kind of do everything again, or we go with the flow and we go with what we have. But at this point, in the end of day 2, we're screwed. Like we don't have enough things. We had 4 levels planned, which were like the levels of a house. The music itself, like starting with a bang and ending with a bang. If we cut the levels in the middle, it would be very anticlimactic. And so we were at night after the event at day 2, and we're like, how can we solve this? Because like we were going really, really down mentally. We were getting psychotic even. At some point, we didn't even know what day it was. I'm saying day 2, but at the time we only knew it was night, because it was really taxing. And we had a lot of stuff to do. How do we solve this? And yeah, we cannot cut the game, but we have to cut the game. So we decided like 6 minutes we cut and it becomes 3 minutes. And let's remix the music in the end so it kind of makes sense and it ends with a bang as well. So day 3. I was expecting this. Okay, so as if you really look at our faces, we're getting. Don't know if you read the portrait of Dorian Gray. Like as time goes by, it becomes like a monster. And this is sort of if you can see that on the internet. But if I jump here, we're getting like our faces are really much more tense. We're drinking coffee like every 2 seconds, and eventually. I'm biting my nails as a monster, and yeah, so this happens. Here we go. This happens, and this was this is a hand, of course, you can see, but this was terrible. Which is at some point I don't even know. I'm just doing stuff. Like we are completely off schedule. We cut a lot of stuff. And I'm looking at the artist which is making the cutscenes, and he's doing a lot of stuff. And eventually, at some point, he starts working on this panel, which is panel for a cutscene that lasts 1 second. And he started working on this in the morning. As you can see, it's very, very well done. But it's like 1 second, and it's like 15 more. And so by the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, like export me the cutscenes. And he's like, yeah, I'm finishing. Because we were really, really tired. But you have no notion of like how lost we were in time. And so like he spent the whole day doing this hand that would last 1 second in the game. So this was actually a problem. We had most of the assets were not done. So this was day 3. And also, I forgot to mention this, but we had no internet. One of the things that was really important was that we live streamed, but we also needed to have a backup of the source. So Lisbon Games Week gave us a splitter to kind of have internet in multiple computers. It didn't work, and even that thing was really slow. So the stream, we just streamed 2 days, and like everything was on one computer. To make things worse, everything, all the electricity was tied to one cable that would go under the player's seat. So imagine if a kid just would go, everything would fall down. So like the TV would break, my computer would break, we would have no game, no backup actually. So that was a lot of pressure, and as things went, like those alarm bells like didn't ring because we were really tired. And we come to day 4, which if you remember, the introduction was a bit long, and now this is really quick. And apparently we are in day 4, and this is how it felt. Like suddenly we are in the last day, and we kind of have to stitch things together. So this became this. You cannot really see here, but most of the assets were finished. And in the final hours, like we kind of had the gameplay ready, but there were a lot of things missing. And this is actually not the final product. The final product was like the dots that you saw before. But this supposedly, with the assets that we have, we would end up with this. And in 1 hour, we were about to do this, but something happened, which was my motherboard broke in the last hour. So, and as that happened, and I was like, first, like the mouse wouldn't work, and then like I couldn't deploy to anything else, like I couldn't use a pen, and then it would just shut down. And then I realized, this is terrible, but we're really, really lucky. Because imagine that happened midway or in the beginning of the event. And so we had no backup of the game. I can show you actually what we ended up with, which is, I think, this, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I think there's no sound. but there should be sound anyway. Okay. So I'm talking and talking, but you haven't actually seen the game. There's actually a final version, which is not this one. At this point, there was no music in the menu. UI was also a thing that we worked on as we went along, because in the beginning, like this is not as bad as it could be, but in the beginning, it was really awkward, where you would see the prompts to dodge and to shoot. And as you can, like, I have to cut off the audio, but as you can see, like, every note is a bullet. So. This section is a bit boring because it's a solo. This was another problem that we identified eventually, which was that this section took too long and it was really, really boring. This is one of the problems of making a game based on music. And so we had a solution for this that I will show you later. But to skip this part, oops. So the idea was that there were 4 levels in the building and you would climb up through these ledges. And yeah, so we ended up with this, and there was a problem, which was that we told the public that after, and this was not done as well, so like the final screen that you see the hand is this one, and like the artist zoomed it in, but like the idea was doing this. We promised the public that we would give them the build the next week. And so it wasn't finished, and the only place the source was in the computer that didn't work, and probably had it to be formatted. So that's amazing news for us. And also there's the credit sequence, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Another problem was that the game ended up being 3 minutes because we had to cut it in half, and with all the credits, yeah, like that, through alphabetic order, and they stay like for 1.5 seconds. The credits are longer than the actual game, so that was also really awkward and weird. And so we have no game. This is like 3 minutes, like longer than the actual game, and like I'm panicking, and I'm like, yeah, maybe we kind of do it. I don't know, next month. So we mail everybody and we say, yeah, don't worry, we're like fixing stuff, and we're like adding more effects. And like that whole month that passed, I was waiting for my computer, because like computers are weird, and I'm trying to, so like this. Okay, so we had to delay, and we had to delay again. So 2 months passed, and at that point I already had my computer, and then like I kind of understood that the code was really unreadable because it was made by a psychotic person in 4 days. And I delayed again, and again, and eventually like those delays were also because since we were delaying so much, we were kind of promising to ourselves like we have to add more stuff because like nobody's gonna wait to see like this plain thing. So another thing, I don't know if you noticed, is that the final version of the game during the event didn't have that shadow system. That was the whole point of doing in top-down. So we wanted to add that. We wanted to have particles when you shot the walls and stuff like that. But at some point, we just had to let go. And we ended up with this, which is also not working. So I think this is the one. Yeah. Yeah, this is the one. This is a bug, by the way. As you can see, there's particles and stuff. If you want to play this is online as well. With all the builds that we did throughout the venue, the event. So the solution to get out of that place was to break a wall. We already sort of saw like there's effects like this, for instance, which kind of took some work to do, and this is why we delayed so much, because this was part of the original plan. The shadows weren't implemented. We actually reversed implement that into as light. So this was the problem, and we solved it like this, like with the Yagari stacks. Like time would go twice as fast, and this was because we tied the whole thing to not to the time of Unity, but to the actual music. So like changing the pitch of the music would make the game go faster. And yeah, so to just finish that up, what went wrong? Like mostly everything about the planning. Like, as you can see, this was a terrible idea that could have gone very wrong. Actually, the finishing of the actual product was terrible. Like, engagement with the public was terrible as well because, like, it was a small thing to, like, send the next week, and it took 6 months. And, like, it was just a really stupid idea. But what went right was that we kind of, because it was so stupid and so out of the blue, like, we kind of made waves, and it was kind of a good, even though we had no game, it was kind of a good thing. Like people remember not playing a game and see it for like the first day there was nothing, and in the end it was actually a good thing. People who were like the 4 days at the venue, they saw the evolution. And so we had a few surprises along the way, but the biggest of them all was that it actually worked. And a few thoughts, like the whole idea was to be different and to kind of be performative, or like engaging with the public in another way that's usually traditional of studios in game development studios that are independent at those venues. Usually even more here in Portugal, you have like someone sitting at a desk, like at a table with a small computer, like maybe a laptop, giving cards, like begging people to play. We kind of reversed engineered that, so like people would be interested, like there was like a mystery element to it, like people would be part of the process. So even though like a couple of things happen not as we planned, we're kind of satisfied with not the result itself, but the idea, and that it made the effect that we wanted. Maybe fixing a couple of things would be the solution for this, but I really believe that as indie developers, we should make an effort to kind of be different or to shock the public, to kind of go away from the traditional route of like what is really successful for really big companies that are really so big that they can fail. If you're like a one-man show, like a two-team studio, four-person studio, you don't have the luxury to go and do the same thing as PlayStation, right? You cannot just show up with your game, but with less material and with less marketing things. You have to somehow be aggressive. You have to somehow shock. And yeah, it wasn't perfect. We ended up with something, but yeah, like maybe next time we do a better job. And I think this should be the spirit. Let's stop as indie developers. Stop like begging people to play like a thing that is on a small laptop. And like I made this 1 month ago in my basement or something like that. Let's just provoke. That, at least that's my opinion. And yeah, so I think I'm over time. Thank you for listening to the talk.